Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here on Black Star Network. And I am thrilled about the conversation that we are having today. We are still celebrating the men in our lives, our fathers, our uncles, our cousins, our brothers, everyone that we love who shapes who we are as individuals. And today we're doing faith, family, and fatherhood, the justice impacted family, and the road to reentry. I hear you. Every now and then, we are all faced with some type of lived experience that moves us out of balance and into a space where we are finding ourselves to be uncomfortable. But of course, our guests, as well as our special guests and subject matter experts, will be with us today to move us into conversation and dialogue that will help us understand how to put things in our toolkit that can move us forward. We are joined today by Dr. Tierney, our Level Up Life coach, Reverend Deborah Bell, who is a health and wellness coach, Katrina Smith, who serves as an educator as well as the owner of Empowered Roots Education and Consulting. And of course, our special guest today is Jamarcus Fields. He is the owner and founder of Iron Sharpens Iron. We are stronger together. Welcome in, everybody. Wow, wow, and wow. I am so excited about this conversation that we're having today because oftentimes we don't know what our families are facing. People usually come into our space in a bunch of different ways, and they have this whole gamut of emotions that are going on. And then we realize, oh, someone in the family was incarcerated, or someone came home from the military, or an estranged loved one decided they needed a place to stay and are moving in with us. All of these things have a way of upsetting the balance that we started in the home. So I want to jump right in with Dr. Tierney because I want to talk about what does it look like to ready yourself to have the unexpected life experience come your way. Because people sometimes don't know how to manage or handle, and they definitely don't talk about the things that are going on in their home that are upsetting them.
Yeah. This may sound a little cliche, but it really is true to expect the unexpected. I think we get into trouble not because the unexpected comes, but because we put ourselves in this space where we want things to stay the same. We want to get into this routine and this pattern where nothing changes. And there's nothing wrong with having a routine, having a pattern, having our good habits and things like that. But when we get so tied to that, when we get so entrenched in that, that when change happens, it throws us, bends us out of shape, and now we're all stressed, and now we're frantic, and now that's where we run into trouble. So in terms of being ready for the different changes and ready for that loved one, to come home, it's really just to expect the unexpected. Get rid of a lot of your expectations of what you think is going to look like, what you think going to happen, what you think it's going to feel like, and really allow yourself to be open to expect the unexpected, and then ride the wave of that. When something happens that you didn't expect, ask questions, try to get an understanding, and see what additional resources, help, support, tools you need in your toolkit to be able to then handle what happened that was not expected.
It's a very interesting dynamic because when you talk about expecting the unexpected, oftentimes there is this what do I do next feeling, and how much of my life am I going to have to change in order to make this space now comfortable for someone else coming into the home. I want to ask Deborah that question because sometimes the emotional well-being, and Dr. Tierney, you've alluded to this before, the emotional well-being that goes into a person being ready. What are some readiness tips, Deb, that we can share about? I don't like sharing my stuff. I don't want them eating my food. I don't want this and I don't want that. And as Tierney said, expecting the unexpected is one thing, but now that you've settled into the reality of it all, what do we need to do from an emotional health and wellness and social engagement space?
So that's a really good question. I think it's one that people probably don't really think about because, as Dr. T says, they just go into it and there's all of this unexpectedness that occurs. So one of the first things, and I probably say this quite a lot, but communication is very important. Someone coming back into a family, back into society, we don't know all of what they've experienced, right? And so we don't really know what their true mindset is about this next phase. And while some people go through next step programs, or they're in housing, preparing to reconnect to society, if they haven't had access to programs that will support them in making a smooth transition, it can be very challenging. So first of all, communication, even before the person re-enters the home or what have you, is critical. The second thing is a family should be prepared to seek counseling. There is about to be some major change. And with major change, again, there is those unexpected things that come up. So seeking counseling could be another opportunity to have a smooth transition. Then each party, the head of the household, you need to sit down and think about, how do you now reincorporate this individual into the home? Yes, you're excited that they're coming back. You're excited that that phase of their life is over. You're excited that now you have your loved one back with you. But what does that really look like? What are going to be, how will that change the structure of the family dynamic, the household dynamic? Does that mean financially? How will you manage just the day-to-day routine? And then what are the expectations that you have for this individual now that they are back? And are they realistic expectations? So I think those things are things that you need to think about prior to having a loved one, a partner, a husband, a brother, whatever, come back into the household. There needs to be communication. You need to think about what that process really looks like day to day. And then what are your expectations for them?
I thank you for that, because as we're having this conversation, my mind jumped immediately to Dr. Tierney and helping people discover. Okay, I'm going to say this. We have a tendency to see the need to walk on eggshells when there's something different introduced into the space. So, Dr. Tierney, what does eggshell walking look like? But at the same time, does that really upset the balance of the home if people feel like they have to walk on eggshells?
Yeah. So I'm gonna come at this a little differently. I was having a conversation with someone just the other day, and they said to me, "Well, I just don't say nothing because I'm trying to keep the peace." And
Mm,
what I said to this person is, "You so busy trying to keep the peace that you're losing the relationship." So when we're talking about walking on eggshells, oftentimes it's because we have not actually got the courage, the oomph, the willingness to actually have the hard conversation. So we're just tiptoeing around topics, we're tiptoeing around feelings, we're tiptoeing around questions instead of actually having the conversation, because we're thinking, well, let me just keep the peace, let me not say nothing, let me just go to my room, let me not get in the way, let me not, and then there becomes this huge divide in the relationship that we don't know where it came from. It was because we were so busy trying to keep the peace that we ultimately stopped talking to each other.
mm,
We ultimately lost the relationship. We kept the peace. It was quiet. Nobody was arguing. Nobody was, at each other's throat. Nobody was having the necessary conversations. And that doesn't necessarily mean that having the necessary conversation is going to lead to an argument. Just like, Deborah said, you have to make sure you're getting that counseling so that you can have those healthy conversations and what that actually looks like. But when we start to allow ourselves to walk on eggshells, understand that what we're doing is we're doing that because we're trying to hold on to something, and we might be missing what's most important in that situation, which is the relationship with that person.
mm. I want to bring Katrina in for a second, because when we talk about relationships and someone entering into the home, there's another group of people who are often impacted by the reentry, and that's the small people. Whether you're in elementary school, middle school, high school, or college, there's been this dynamic that someone is missing. And then all of a sudden they're plopped right in back into the space, oftentimes trying not to skip a beat. But the children, Katrina, how are children impacted? And back to Deb's, tip about communication. How do we engage the children that a change is happening or about to come that is going to really sort of shift how they've been functioning and acting in the home?
I think when we think about reentry, and there are children involved, you have to sit down and be having those, what I would call family meetings. Have some conversations about there being a change coming. And this change is going to be different than the normal. Have the honest conversation with your child. You'd be surprised how much children understand, but have an honest conversation with them that things are going to be different. There's a new person in the house. There are going to be different expectations. There's going to be an extra voice, an extra person at the table. There'll be someone extra trying to share thoughts and ideas and maybe wanting to do something with the child. I would even suggest setting up regular family meetings where all of you sit down and come up with some non negotiables. What is going to be the temperature or gauge the temperature in your house? What are going to we expecting? What are we going to talk about? How do we navigate mornings? How do we navigate bedtimes? Who's putting somebody to bed? Who's talking to the teacher? Is that person going to be an integral part in helping that child with homework? I even would say something that Deborah said, do you need a social worker? Do you have a counselor? Do you need to set up regular therapy meetings for you and the child, and then meetings as a family so you can learn and grow from this so that this reentry is a smoother reentry for all that is involved? When little people are involved, emotions, that child is has a lot of emotions inside of them, and helping them process all the emotions that they're going to feel. They're going to be happy moments because they're going to be happy somebody's back, but then they're going to be sad moments like, well, that's not the way we do it. Where you been? Why weren't you here when I needed you? And so helping a child really get through those tough times of processing their emotions and letting them it's okay to be happy and then be sad. You're going to be on a roller coaster for a while because that is all a part of that reentry process. I also would say, especially when it's school age children, notifying the school, working with the counselor or the administrator, asking them to look for if Johnny's having a hard day. Is he sad? Is he withdrawn? Is he acting out? You want to know any changes in behavior, especially at the school when you're not around, so that people are there to let you know so that you can better support your child. At the end of the day, it goes back to one common thing: communication. Everyone that's involved is going to have to be willing to communicate, and then over communicate. Because the more that you communicate, the better things can be. Um, we don't want people walking around on eggshells. That's not a good place to be because what happens, you don't even feel comfortable in your own home when you walk around on eggshells. So you want to be able to communicate, but have healthy communication. And I think that is the key.
I like that. So we've given a lot of tips, tools, and keys. When we come back after the break, I want to dive into a one-on-one conversation with Jamarcus Fields. He is the owner and founder of Iron Sharpens Iron. We are stronger together. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Bria Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Welcome back, everyone. As you can tell, we all have our own set of ways of dealing with not only just reentry, but how we navigate lived experiences and life changes. I want to talk to our special guest today, Jamarcus Fields, because he is a subject matter expert in this particular area. Jamarcus, how you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing great. I am excited that you are here today because you can see we all, from our various professions, have a way of thinking that we would deal with all of these situations that come to us in our fields of counseling, coaching, and consulting. But this is your lived experience. So can you walk us through your journey and how your company was started so that we can get an actual picture of not only what iron sharpens iron does, but you as a person who've gone through the reentry process, as well as how you help others navigate the journey?
Yeah. So again, being justice involved. When I was on my way home, I had the pleasure of going through a reentry facility, and while at the reentry facility, I came into the harsh reality of actually how far behind the curve and unprepared I actually was, even with all the work I put in a lot of work, but without lived experience on the other side and application of everything that I had acquired. I was like a fish out of water. And I knew after doing time that all of the guys coming behind me, that if somebody didn't put something in place to help and assist these guys, that they were going to be in trouble. So I decided to be a change agent. I wanted to provide them what I wish I had while I was in that situation. So that's what prompted me to create Iron Sharpens Iron, so that I could have that kind of impact.
With the impact that you have, the services that you provide, what is needed? Because us on the other side of the, I had uncles who, had experiences. I had people who came back and, we were like, oh, so-and-so's coming home, throw a party. And that's the end of the conversation. And I know that happens, but there's some work that goes into, the readiness level. What is it? So take us through two things. One, when you're on your way out, what type of preparation is given? And I ask that question so that individuals who have someone that's coming home soon will at least have a baseline understanding of what that person knows about being ready to come home. That's part one.
Okay. So the unfortunate reality is that when you're inside, the system is doing what they're doing in terms of reentry is very minimal. The work is on us as individuals to try to prepare ourselves. And again, how do you prepare yourself without being in that space? So it's very hard. We've had to adapt to an environment that we were not raised for. So we basically became different individuals. We had characteristics, personality traits, survival techniques that we had to take on that have become a part of who we are. And the more time you do, the harder it is to take those layers off before you get ready to come home. So in your mind, you will think that you're ready. But the reality is you're actually not. And so coming home, there are so many unrealistic expectations of us for ourselves and for individuals that are waiting on us because they don't understand the mental adversities that we've just been through. Like we've just went through a very traumatic experience and we really don't know how to deal with it or how to shake it off.
And you raise a great segue point, because that's my second question. So there is transitional housing, and I know on television they call them halfway houses, but they have so much better names. And, I think Deborah mentioned Seek and some other programs that we've been engaged in as it relates to reentry. How do those programs aid and guide individuals? And do they come before your program or after the program that you offer?
It kind of depends on where they are in their reentry by the time they reach us. I mean, we do go back into the penal facilities, and try to grab and reach as many of the men as we can. But when you're dealing with that system, sometimes you have emergency releases, you have sentence modifications that have been granted, sentences have gotten cut shorter, and they're released before their actual time that they expected to be released. So you have a myriad of options that you have to deal with. But if I had my way, everyone incarcerated, I feel, should go through some sort of reentry facility or work release program. I know here where I'm at in Indiana, there's only one here in the state. So you have maybe 2% of the population that gets to experience that. That was a saving grace for me, and not many people get to experience that. But reentry facilities, halfway houses, work release centers, they are all good to help you get some lived experience and some support and resources available to you before you come home. And that is very much needed.
So what was the toughest part? Because I'm listening to you talk, and I definitely can identify with what you're saying, the transition from having been, and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it in air quotes, institutionalized, because there was this set regimen of what you needed to do from morning, evening, overnight. All of this was planned for your life. Now, all of a sudden, you're saying you got to wake yourself up. You got to make sure that you're fed. You got to know how to go and look for a job. You got to figure out how to communicate with people out in IRL, in real life, while at the same time keeping your wits about you and not becoming overwhelmed, as you said, to walk into a society that you were not born for because you weren't there. Some people, when cell phones came, when computers came, when the internet came, there are so many things that have happened. And now we're dealing with AI. This is an entirely different world. Does your program or programs like these in other states provide individuals with experiences that help them live in real time, in real life?
Yes, we do. Recognizing that that was definitely needed. You're coming back again into a society that has become foreign to you. But like, I went inside at the age of 18. I came home 44. So the expectations that were placed on me were those of a 44-year-old man. The problem was I didn't know who I was as a 44-year-old man in society. I had been gone since I was 18. And that's what happens to a lot of us. We experience arrested development. And so when we come home, you know, everybody's looking at the fact that we're 30, 40, whatever age you are when you come home. But with the lack of lived experience in a lot of areas, I still was an 18-year-old teen. So I found, as some of the other speakers spoke to earlier, communication is the number one thing that we have to face, because we're coming from two different worlds, two different sets of paradigms that we're trying to merge into one. And by default, we're coming out of the facilities walking on eggshells, because in prison, you have to walk on eggshells. Most people have lost their voice, so they don't know how to confront when something's wrong, because we come from an environment that doesn't bode well. And so if both parties are walking on eggshells, then we're setting this up for destruction. So communication has to be key. And I often tell the guys, we have to be able to get to a place where we learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's the only way we're going to be able to climb that ladder, is being able to have those uncomfortable conversations. Know how to take a moment and collect ourselves when we're in uncomfortable situations, because we're going to find ourselves in a lot of them.
I'm taking a deep exhale, because in many ways it does sound like the beginnings or workings of, we've had some of us in our lifetime, and for our audience that is viewing, you're probably thinking about your own traumatic lived experience, but then you have this incarcerated lived experience, you have military, lived experience, you have, people who come out of domestic violence situation lived experiences, and that's all on the trauma side. What role does therapy and counseling play in preparedness for the individual who's coming home from being incarcerated or having a traumatic experience?
It plays a large role. I know when I came home, I kind of fought against therapy for a while, but eventually I realized that I did need it. I had to digress and humble myself and go get some assistance because, you know, I was one of those individuals who didn't want to have those tough conversations, who, you know, was more focused on keeping the peace while things around me were unraveling. And I had to ask myself, you know, do you want to be, you know, you want to be right, or do you want to be in relationship? And so I encourage everyone that comes through Iron Sharpens Iron to seek therapy, and not just personal therapy, but like if you're going home to your family, or if you're going home to a significant other, then y'all need to get into some couples counseling and figure out what this looks like and be able to put everything on the table: strengths, weaknesses, insecurities, doubts, concerns. We need to be able to put this all on the table and figure out what this looks like collectively for us, because they're going to need somebody to walk this journey with them, and not walk the journey judging them and belittling them the whole time, but understanding that collectively we have to grow and we need somebody else to come in to help us get this together. So therapy is huge and very much needed.
When we come back after the break, let's dive into this conversation of what does, as Katrina said, come to the table and have some family conversation look like. Yeah, y'all, we're going to get into it. We're going to have a family conversation about all the things we are not saying that need to be said as we look more into faith, family, and fatherhood, the re-entry journey. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
We begin tonight with the people who are really running the country right now.
Now, Trump is often wrong and misleading about a lot of things, but especially about history.
Donald Trump falling in line with President Elon Musk.
In the wake of the unsettling news that MSNBC has canceled Joy Ann Reid's primetime show, The Readout, Roland Martin and the Black Star Network would like to extend an invitation to all of the fans of Joy Ann Reid's MSNBC show to join us every night to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming on the Black Star Network, for news, discussion of the issues that matter to you, and the latest updates on the twice impeached, criminally convicted felon-in-chief Donald Trump and his unprecedented assault on democracy, as well as co-president Elon Musk's takeover of the federal government. The Black Star Network stands with Joy Ann Reid and all folks who understand the power of Black voices in media. We must come together and never forget that information is power. Be sure to watch Roland Martin Unfiltered weeknights, 6 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin, or download the Black Star Network app.
Welcome back, everyone. And as you can tell, your toolkit should be getting filled with tips and tricks and opportunities to be able to move conversation and life forward when dealing with reentry. Now, in this particular segment, I want us to all come together and let's do a table talk, because oftentimes, you know, we whispering to auntie, we over here talking to big mama, we talking to uncle out on the driveway. We're having all these conversations about a person or about a subject matter that seemingly needs to be had out in the open. So come on in, y'all. Let's have a family conversation, because, you know, one of the things that Jamarca said was, and all of you have said this, that communication is key. And whereas we all have these expectations about what's going to happen, what can happen, what it's going to look like, there was something that I wrote down. So let's talk about it, is what I want to dive into in this box. What are some of the things, and I'll start with Dr. Tierney, what is one thing that you think when families come together like we are today that should be talked about? And then let's dive into giving them the tips and tools that they can use. Go.
Thanks for putting me first. One thing that we can talk about as a family, I guess, in terms of just the overall family dynamic, talking about the goals for the family. I think sometimes we just assume like, oh, that's just my family. Oh, that's just but it's just a name only. Like, how are we connected? What are we working towards? What is the goal, the mission, the vision, the values of this family? And having a conversation about that, and then kind of rallying around that it's a shared understanding that, you know, as the Smiths, we fill in the blank, and it's something that everyone can kind of buy into, everyone believes in. And so it helps to tie those familial bonds.
So, Dr. Tierney is absolutely right when we say let's talk about it, that the role of support in the home is important. I want to jump now to Jamarcus, because you mentioned something, Jamarcus, where you said that you were 18 and came home at 44, and you still were in that understanding of an 18-year-old. Can you walk us through how important family support is as it relates to reentry and coming home?
Yeah, considering, like I came home to family. So that was very big for me, how I was received, what kind of reception I got, and their expectations of me. But I realized that the expectations I had for my family, as well as the expectations my family had for me, were totally different. Like we were missing on all levels. And because I was on eggshells already coming out of prison, being, everything being dictated for me, told what to do, what not to do, I didn't really have a voice. So I sat back and expected family to guide me through this. But again, they're like, he's a grown man coming home, and they don't know how much prison had impacted me. So they lost their voice in the relationship, and we're all strangers to one another. The last thing you want is, in the midst of trying to piece your life back together, for home to not be a comfortable place. Which is why conversation is so important. I challenge anyone to, when you come home, have that tough conversation with the family. Let's understand goals. Let's understand expectations, what you're wanting, what I'm wanting. And in some instances, you may find that certain situations just might not work for all parties involved. And you have to be prepared for that as well, because we're virtually coming home. We're strangers. They're strangers to us. We really don't know each other, but if we're not going to communicate, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. Family support is very strong, but you have to communicate and make sure you're all on the same page.
I thank you for sharing that. Deb, let's talk about what?
So, well-being. Jamarcus raises a very important point, that now this person coming back into the home is a stranger, and the people in the home are strangers to them as well. And so as it relates to a healthy communication, finding a place of well-being, this has to come through, one, exploring expectations. That's one thing. What is expected? Can we sit down and have a little catch me up time? Not just a jovial, ha ha, oh, this happened, oh, you should have been here when that happened, but more about, we recognize that we've been apart for a long time. So let's talk about where we are now. Let's talk about what your desire is for your life. Have you even had time to think about that? Let's talk about, what does the family look like now that you're incorporated back into the household and into our lives? What do you expect? And then sharing what the other members of the family expect. And then once you get those things out in the open, then you can discover, oh, that's not realistic. We can't expect that of you, being, using Jamarcus's analogy of being an 18-year-old going in. That's who we knew you as. And now you're 44. We expect you to get on it, get out and find a job. We expect that you would take care of the responsibilities of whatever your parole or whatever that is. So then those unsaid expectations are compiled and they can create a whole lot of stress. So getting all of that out in the open is going to be important. But how do you know how to do that? Most of us don't. So you need help. Charlotte mentioned a social worker. We've talked about therapy, or even a life coach to help with this time of transition. You have to know that this is transition, and transitions are not always easy, and they have to be managed step by step by step. And the first step is looking at what those expectations are. What do I expect of you? What do you expect of us? How do we bring that together so that we can make this a smooth transition? That sometimes requires help.
Yeah, and I love all of those, because it does say to us that the more we start to talk and have communication, the more we build relationship. And that's been the thing that's missing, the relationship, the how do we identify, relate to one another? How do we care for each other? And all of that is valuable as we start to look at what does it mean to, have that family time once again. Katrina, let's talk about it. What are we talking about?
So I think we heard some great things from everybody. One of the things that I would say is carving out that time to address the issue. We don't, how we do at Big Mama's house. Big Mama's like, they went away. They use code words for things, but they never really talk about it. So I would suggest addressing the issue. Everybody putting everything on the table. When you left, I felt. When you left, I. Address the I about you so that everybody sitting at that table has an opportunity. When this happened, I felt. Now, everybody's going to have a different I feel, but let everybody get their I feel out. Let everybody share that, because we can't move forward. And after we do that, let's not forget to pray. We should be praying before the person comes home, while they're in the car driving home. Once they get home, we need to pray for the entire family, because this is not going to be easy. This is something that takes work and takes constant work, something we must do on a daily basis to make a transition work. I like something Jamarcus said earlier. You got to know when it doesn't work, and you have to know when to walk away. Mm-hmm. Once you talk about the expectation, you've laid out where everybody can meet each other in the middle, you have to realize if this is not for you, because as you've been away and they've been there, people have grown and changed because of the season. And so you have to realize, in this season, is this the right place for me to be?
I like that. So as you can tell, there's a lot to talk about at the table. And we probably have about 2 minutes left, but I'm going to push the envelope a little bit before I go to block 4. Because what I'd like to talk about is because this is back to walking on eggshells, where does the R word come in? That level of resentment. Maybe I'll do that in block 4. When we come back after the break, I want to talk about the R word. It's sort of like the elephant in the room. There is resentment. And I don't think that we can have a real, honest, substantive conversation without addressing people's emotions, the attitude, the disdain, all of that keeps people from having healthy, whole, and happy relationships again. We'll be back in a moment after the break.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
Welcome back, everybody. And as you can see, faith, family, fatherhood, all of those things are very important as we talk about the justice impacted individual and them transitioning back into the home. We've talked a little bit about family. We've talked somewhat about the kids, but there's this elephant in the room, and it's the people in our life and in our spaces that harbor resentment. The resentment that you went away, the resentment that you were gone for so long, the resentment that now you're coming back after we finally got our lives together. Resentment, resentment, resentment. And if that is not addressed, is there an expectation that people can be healthy, happy, and whole again? Jamarcus, talk to us about that for a moment, because oftentimes we'll have these nice, polite conversations. And as Katrina said, we sugarcoating everything, and Big Mama said it all nice. But at the end of the day, there is something else that's brewing underneath the surface that needs to be addressed.
It definitely does. Unfortunately, not many people really understand what's going on with them. When you're talking reentry, and I can only speak specifically of reentry from incarceration, that we don't realize that sometimes us coming home, our presence alone can be triggering to someone else's trauma. Because when we get arrested and go do time, we may be the only one sitting inside the facility, but it affects everybody around us. And we left some people in some hard situations, some tough times. They had to totally readjust their lives. A lot of us left mothers out with our children to raise them by themselves, and they feel some kind of way about that. But when you're not educated on trauma and healthy ways of coping with it, you don't even know how to address the situation, because you really don't even understand what's going on with you. That's why therapy is so important, to bring in somebody who can identify this and take the blinders off and make everybody realize what's really going on. We can't progress because we can't forget the past. We don't know how to harness that hurt and in a healthy way of dealing with it. And so it comes out in painful ways. It comes out in arguments. It comes out in being very judgmental, being harsh, over expectations that we place on certain individuals, because the whole time we've been triggered, our trauma has resurfaced, and we don't know how to deal with it.
I appreciate you saying that, because I was just thinking, Black women, we cuss a lot. When we get into that space, and then we also spew a lot of hate, and we keep reliving, the experience. And then in some ways people become, the victim over and over and over again, because there is this refusal to address their own trauma and triggers. As a Black man coming back into the home, what are some of your recommendations for women who are, early release happens, overcrowding, and it happens. And sometimes you just really, they're coming home, but then they come home early. But how do people who are at home waiting really settle into releasing themselves from resentment? How soon is too soon for coaching, counseling, or therapy?
It's hard to put a time limit on it, because every individual is different, every situation is different. You definitely don't want to do it too soon, because it's going to cause the individual coming home to get in this defensive mode, and I don't think they're going to be ready to receive it. But it's definitely something that needs to be nurtured into the conversation a little down the line. I would say, let's cut it up into blocks. Let's give it a 90-day run, see where we're at. If we don't think we're ready for it yet, or even at a healthy place to broach the conversation, let's try it again at the 6-month mark. But at some point, it has to be ushered in, because a lot of guys coming home, like, the person that they had to become has become normal to them. So they don't think anything is wrong. This is totally normal. This is how I've been operating, and I'm doing just fine. But you your loved one or your family member on the other end is seeing something totally different in your behavioral patterns. So to address it immediately is going to make that individual defensive, as if you're judging him or thinking that he's institutionalized and not giving him a fair chance. So I would say just kind of keep revisiting it, but it's something that has to be put on the table and we have to address it.
I appreciate you saying that, because that is something to consider. Deb, pop in for a second, because you were talking about the health and well-being dynamics of it, but there's also, as Jamarca said, there's that level of trauma. In what space or place does emotional trauma fit? And if the trauma is deep, now I'm asking this because Jamarca said that, some people leave kids at home and then there's raising them on their own, and that wasn't what they intended to do, and all of these various things that impact them. How do we help the wounded heal? I guess is the best way to ask that question.
Let me start this part of the conversation, by just sharing something that kind of is a prelude to what you asked about the trauma. A relative of mine came home and like you mentioned earlier, big party, dinner party, everybody's in the house and everybody's laughing and talking, having fun. And all of a sudden, I didn't see this individual with the group. When I went to look for them, they were standing in the washroom with the lights out, but the door was open, just standing there. He wasn't accustomed to being in this space in this kind of way with the family. So he went to a space that was comfortable. And that speaks to the level of trauma. And so we're not just dealing with trauma from whatever you experienced before prison, you're also dealing with the trauma of prison. And now coming home, not having that trauma dealt with in any real way. And so if there's anything that I could say, you have to sit down again and talk with this individual about where they are. Jamarcus mentioned that people think that their way of thinking is normal. They think that they're fine because this is what they've had to become. But it doesn't mean that they are fine. And we will never know that unless we open up that particular area of, let's talk a little bit about how you deal with your day to day. Because everybody's not going to know how to get to a deep level in a conversation to talk about healing, right? Most of us have a whole problem trying to heal on our own, let alone trying to walk someone else through their healing. You are going to need professional help. But it starts with simple conversations. I know that your day to day is very different than what it is now. So help me understand what's going to make you comfortable. Open the door for just a simple conversation. Don't try to make it heavy or weighty. In our home, where's your comfort space? How can we make you feel more at home? And at first, you're probably going to get, no, I'm all right. Don't worry about me. I'm good. Well, push the issue a little bit. Mm. Push the issue of what can we do to make this transition easy for you. Again, they may not know, but keep coming back to the conversation, helping them to understand that you love and you welcome them and you want to walk with them through this time of transition. Prayer, someone brought up prayer. Prayer is so important because the work that God can do through prayer is so much greater than what we can do on our own. But try, even if you can't bring that person to therapy, you go and get some tips and ways of managing the relationship as you're rebuilding. So you know what to do. You know how to handle have a better handle on how to manage certain things as they come up. But you got to be proactive. And I think that's very important.
I will concur there. Katrina, share with us for a minute about, we're talking about resentment and all of these things. And I think that kids sometimes, we tell kids you're supposed to be seen and not heard. And as Deborah said, so-and-so is standing over there doing a thing. And then kids will say, oh, that's just my uncle, so-and-so, he's weird like that. Or, kids have a way of expressing themselves in ways that adults be like, oh my God, wait, hold up. We need to talk about this a little more so we can get some better language. But children who are dealing with a father who is coming home and trying to mend that relationship, how do we help them not stay in a space of anger and resentment and bitterness and guide them, toward having civility with that father?
So one of the things that Deborah mentioned was getting professional help. Also, depending on your budget, everybody may not can afford that, right? But there are things that you can do. Reaching out where you live to a social worker. You could reach out to your school system. A lot of school systems have social workers in their school and trained counselors. Those are opportunities for them to meet with your child. A lot of times students, when their dad comes home, they're so excited and they want kids to know, but they've been told at home, we don't talk about that. And so they carry that excitement with them that he's coming home, but I can't tell people at school that my dad was incarcerated and he's coming home. And so they have to learn early to navigate. So they come up with these stories of, my dad works in California and he just here for the weekend and he'll be gone again in between those times, right? And so it can be difficult, but honesty is always the best policy. Being honest with your child and providing an opportunity for that conversation to happen and for you to have the opportunity to just explain, this is where he is temporarily. It doesn't negate how much he loves you or how much he may want to be with you. But at this time, he's not able to. Being able to share that in a loving and kind environment and helping that child put things in place, coping skills. How do they handle when they feel sad or they wish they could hug him? What do they do so that they can feel the love and support of him when he can't be there? Are there opportunities for them to write, to record videos, to take pictures, things that they can share and mail that help them continue building that so when they do return, there's not as much resentment. There's going to be some, no matter what we do. But helping for a young person to be able to navigate those waters is so important.
Navigating the waters of the unexpected is definitely, among the things that we'll continue to talk about. I'm excited to share that we will do this again on next week. So make sure that you join us for part 2 as we talk about faith, family, and fatherhood, from rebellion to rebuilding. When we come back after the break, I'll give my reflection.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Welcome back, everybody. And as you can tell, you got some things in your toolkit that will help you on your journey, whether you are experiencing an individual who is coming home from incarceration or from some other space where they have been estranged from the household. It behooves us to understand that communication is the key. Sometimes we want to talk about it and sometimes we don't want to talk about it. But the key is that you get in your spirit that you need to have some crucial conversations around what is happening, why it's happening, and how we can begin to move forward. In addition to that, you also want to make certain that you're taking the time to get yourself into therapy, whether it's school-sponsored, state-sponsored, or some local reentry program that will lead and guide you toward preparing you to be in the home. And then for those of you who are receiving someone from coming home, it is nice to have an exciting party and a good time because we want to show them the love, but also make yourself ready for what happens next after the party and the people are gone and all the balloons have been popped. You have to be ready to sit down at the table and have some substantive conversations. Thank you for watching. Bye now.